Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, Monster Hunter Wilds was officially announced last night, and the hype train is absolutely a-rolling. What a day, what a time, and what we got was just over 1 minute as an announcement trailer shown to us that looked like an absolutely massive difference from any Monster Hunter game that we have ever seen before. The scope and size of what they have shown us here is so massively ambitious that even with the most minimal amount of knowledge that we have about the game, I could not possibly be more hyped to see what they have in store for us. That said, we did get just over a 1 minute trailer, and while there are general things that we'll all catch, right here we're going to be diving deep down into this thing, pretty much just one scene at a time and just breaking down every bit of relevant information so that we can just suck up all of it, as much of that Monster Hunter Wilds energy as we can, and learn everything possible to learn about this game from the trailer itself. And I'll talk about a couple of my basic theories as well that have developed over the first few hours of thinking and talking about this that I've done since, first watching the trailer. Yes, it is 7 a.m. when I'm recording this. I promise I don't usually do this. Starting right at the very beginning here, we have a new deserty type map with a giant pointy spire in the background that seems to be some sort of lightning rod type thing. On the screen we see two new small monster types that are new to the series but sort of reminiscent of previous creatures in some way. The first creature that we zoom in on are these little pangolin type dudes. You can see they have male and female versions, the female ones being the ones carrying all those little birds on their back, which by the way I do believe to be endemic life, so that looks like confirmation of those types of interactions that we had in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne. Then the male ones also have a bird, but just one that is on their head. Then they also have these massive spires on their back that almost mimic the ones on the map itself, as they do seem to have some sort of lightning powers. Then we get a closer look at one of these spires of the map, as well as a better look at the other new small monster here. These almost look like Kestodon, but a bit more like a wildebeest almost. Bony horns, beards on the males but not the females, and there's actually a new species of raptor that is shown here as well that a lot of people seem to have missed, a little group of them just running by. As well on the screen you can see in the background between the trees, there's some sort of winged drake type flying creature flying through the air, could be similar to the monster that we actually ride. Then you see a lightning storm start brewing in the distance. Weather seems to be making a big appearance in this trailer, which implies to me a much more significant dynamic weather system, possibly even that these storms are a notable part of the story itself, but we'll dive into that part later. Then we get our first look at the hunter riding on top of a brand new bird wyvern, as we can possibly see, but it doesn't really fit the normal bird wyvern skeleton, as it also does later on run on all fours instead of just two. It can also fly, so this seems to almost be a new sort of skeleton mix of the two. Looks like another little raptor species as well, and they do close-up zoom in on its left side, and they show a little pouch here with some tiny bags, a hammer, and this is clearly a little supply bag to me. My theory around this from the rest of what we've seen in the trailer is I think this will replace the concept of a tent that we've had in the 5th generation. This is clearly still an open world game, but the world seems to be even more open than we've ever had before. We didn't see anything resembling a camp in this trailer, but this mount seems to be extremely important to the game as it is featured for the entire trailer. The hunter never gets off of the mount. So what if it is basically a mobile camp? It sort of is your base that you ride around on. Rather than having your whole item box at your fingers in a tent, you just get a set amount of resupplying from your mount. Then we get a glimpse from the front, and you can see on the other side of the mount, there's a little pouch, and this appears to be holding a light bowgun in it. This has led people to theorize that you can perhaps even bring a second weapon on a hunt, which to me lends credence to my no more tents idea. And what if this is essentially you can bring 2 loadout slots with you on a hunt, 2 equipment sets, and then you can swap between them at will from your mount. That would be a really cool concept, and it would change the way that we think about hunting, honestly. The other main thing that this mount tells us is that palamutes are probably gone, at least for this specific entry, not coming back in this game, so that's worth mentioning as well. We also don't see a lick of actual combat from the hunter, but from the way that the mounted movement works, I can absolutely believe there will be some sort of combat from the back of these mounts too, but we'll have to see if that actually plays out the way that I imagine. Then we see these new massive chunky boys that I already love to death coming in, a whole pack chasing the hunter, and they sort of seem like a cross between a bear and a baboon, or maybe even a lion, and they start chasing the hunter. We then see a bit more hunter in frame with a greatsword on their back. It looks a bit smaller than a normal greatsword. I would say maybe even a bit more rooted in realism, and it also looks quite fancy. It's very aesthetically pleasing too. It looks great. After that, the hunter runs through the pack of pangolin looking dudes, spooking them and causing them to run quickly, which also makes the birds fly off of their back as well, making a really cool scene. All the while the baboon bears are lunging at the hunter, trying to knock him off its mount, and the armor set on the hunter as well, we can pause on here, looks quite nice but also pretty minimal. Not quite the over the top sets that we are used to seeing, and I think again from what I can see in this trailer that is a purposeful decision. This game seems to me aesthetically to be trying to root itself more in a bit of a realistic way. Then a massive dust cloud pushes in, shoving the storm coming through, causing all the wildlife to disappear for a moment until they arrive at the eye of the storm inside of the actual dust cloud, lightning crashing down from the sky, hitting the pillars of the map itself and creating this crazy looking atmospheric condition that looks incredible, and the baboon bears start attacking looking like large monsters, even though they arrived in a massive pack, so it would be interesting if so, and as that is the case, I have to assume they are probably a small monster. They just happen to be particularly big. It's cool to note that it seems that one of these baboon bears also either doesn't have a tail or has an injured tail of some sort, and that brings up a whole new possibility, like animals just being injured or uniquely marked out in the wild, like a chance to spawn in a scarred young Garuga type thing, but for all kinds of creatures perhaps. Around here as well, the mount starts running on all fours instead of just on the hind legs, almost like a sprint perhaps, and you also get a better glimpse of what is clearly a light bowgun in the bag on the right side. Then we see lightning hitting the ground near a player, which looks fantastic. You see the massive scale of the map behind them, the way that the grass on the ground lights on fire after the lightning strike hits it. It just looks gorgeous really, and it also seems to actually hit and hurt the monsters too. Then we see the mount jumping back and forth on some gem covered rocks as a sort of like context sensitive movement animation. I would assume from this animation specifically, this is sort of like climbing a vine wall, but meant to look cooler, an animation that you can only do while mounted to traverse more significant areas of the map, almost like a zone transition, if you want to put it that way. Then we see the mount full on fly, and that is a crazy concept to add to a Monster Hunter type of game, a real evolution of what they were doing with the Palamutes in Rise and Sunbreak, but brought into the scope and scale of Monster Hunter World. Honestly, a larger scope and scale than what we have seen so far. The whole area that we can see in the background of every shot looks absolutely massive. If we can actually go to everywhere that we can see, this is gargantuan, and we don't even know how many maps there are like this. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the Monster Hunter game where even the maps become sort of connected, so rather than being multiple maps, there's just one gigantic map with different biomes around it, and you can actively travel from one to the next without even having to leave a hunt. It looks that big and open to me. Then we see some sand blow over the barren land, and then suddenly the trees grow leaves, grass grows under it, the river flows with water as we look ahead, and at some sort of nearly floating ruin-shaped rocks, an incredible shape to them, and you can see another one of these in the background too, and the way these things are placed is almost physics-defying. They don't look natural. They look either man-made, like maybe an ancient civilization type thing, or monster-created, maybe leading to the actual main enemy of the game, the sort of the Elder Dragon in charge of it all. And it's quite the interesting thing to think about in itself. As we then round this off, then we get the Capcom Presents, the title drop on screen, and one theory that pops into my head just on how the entire environment that we can see in this trailer looks, the style of it all, the style of the armor, the weapon, the hunter, the style of the title itself. Monster Hunter World was supposed to be some sort of in the Americas type of location. It was supposed to give you that type of idea, journey across the ocean to a new content type of deal. Rise and Sunbreak's locations were very clearly inspired by Japan and then England as well. So my theory, just from everything we've seen here, is this looks a lot like Africa to me. The color palette, the way the trees look, the way the weapon look, the way the monsters look, this is exactly how I would imagine a Monster Hunter game being that is inspired by Africa as a continent, and honestly it was only a matter of time before that happened if that is in fact the case. On top of that, we have the name itself, Wilds, and what that could imply. First though, the final point here, we have Rathalos fly over, looking incredible of course, and we get to see his size compared to some of the other small monsters that we saw in the background, which to me confirms him to be quite tiny in comparison. Finally, that is simply followed by a release timeline that just says 2025, so we have a year of release window to look forward to and a year to wait before that happens. So more theories, more thoughts, let's just dive into it. The only large monster I believe we saw in this trailer is Rathalos. Everything else traveled in some sort of pack, which implies that they are a small monster. The map looks absolutely enormous, the movement is fast, and with flight now involved, we can expect that the maps will in fact be much larger, more traversable, more vertical than ever as well, and from what I can tell from the limited few areas that we saw, it almost looks like there is just a large patch of open land, presumably an area where a large monster would fight, then some more narrow corridors leading to more very large open patches of land. So this works sort of like zones from previous Monster Hunter games, but they look to be such just absolutely ginormous in this game, comparatively speaking, that it doesn't even feel like a zone. It feels like an entire biome in itself. That said, as a result of the size of these maps, the way that the travel looks, and the complete lack of any story revealed to us, but a real importance shown on the weather, the actual density of the small monsters, the many different types in a small area, and also showing the ground literally changing on the map, growing in real time, this leads me to think this isn't going to be our standard Monster Hunter game. I'm seeing something quite different here. It's quite special. Maybe it's just more story driven than it's ever been before, and so they want that to speak for itself in this first announcement trailer. They want us attached to the mystery. Maybe it's just the fact that this is over a year before the new release date for the game, and usually Monster Hunter only gets announced 6 months early, so they might just not have as much as usual to share. Or maybe it's something far more crazy, and this is actually a new age Monster Hunter MMO. Because, well, I can't lie, that thought occurred to me when seeing the scale of it all. The sheer number of monsters in the same area, multiple different types in the same place, the size of the environments, I don't think it's impossible at all. Aside from that, partly due to the mount and its importance, partly the size of the environment, partly the way that the mount seems to store some gear for you, and most importantly, the fact that the only hunter we see in the entire trailer is actually ourselves, I have a bit of a theory that this will be unlike most Monster Hunter games. And what if instead of being heavily involved in guild activities, part of a village, something like that, what if this is a true open world Monster Hunter? Wilds referring to you being a lone hunter who has to survive on their own. Hold up, them raptors are tiny as fuck. Living off of the land and making sure it is taken care of in return. Yeah, that might be a bit far, but I also think that is within the realm of possibility, and I love considering those kinds of off-kilter but possible realities too. Then we have one more interesting thing to bring up. In every single Monster Hunter main series announcement trailer, one major feature has been the reveal of the flagship monster. That is a constant and consistent fact up to this point. However, in this trailer, the only notable large monster that we saw was actually Rathalos, which implies one of three things. One, Rathalos is the flagship of this game, and this is a return to the beginning sort of. Like say, it's almost like a reboot for the franchise due to how different it is, and so they are bringing it back to its roots and returning the original flagship to be the flagship once more in Rathalos. Two, the mount monster is the flagship. Think about it. A flagship doesn't have to be a huntable monster, or even if they are, what if the mount is just one friendly monster of an otherwise aggressive species? Sort of like stories where it's a baby of a, adult species that you would otherwise fight. After all, it seems like they are quite important to the game. Then the third option, they just aren't ready to show the flagship monster yet. Again, they usually only announce the game 6 months before they release, so it's entirely possible they simply don't want to show that as of this moment. Either way, the game looks incredible. That's all of my thoughts on it, really everything that I noticed, a few of my more sort of starter theories rumbling around in my brain as I digest this information, and for anyone worried about me seeing this, as I always do, go into new Monster Hunter games spoiler free for a genuine fresh reaction. I am only watching this announcement trailer. Blinders are on after this moment. As well, it's worth noting that Josh is on vacation right now, and I'm sure you all want to hear his thoughts on this too, and he will get them to you as soon as he's back, do not worry. After all this, I'm just so excited for the future of Monster Hunter. The absolute scale of this game looks so crazy to me from this brief look into it that we got. And if there is one development team that I believe to hit the mark when I see them showing off something this ridiculously ambitious, it is the Monster Hunter creation crew. Alright everyone, that'll do it for this one. I'm gonna go try and get some sort of sleep, but let's be honest, how the hell can I sleep when I have this much just pure hype flowing through my veins? Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.